welcome everybody who's joined in. Thanks for tuning in for this YA at BookSync event. Things are looking a little bit different, but we're still so excited to be here offering events like this one, especially for lovely local authors like Nina and Tiffany. Welcome. We're so excited to have you on the West Coast. And it's a pretty awesome experience that so many people across the country can join us from their living rooms, from their bedrooms, and still celebrate all of the awesome authors who are putting out books these days. So we're really appreciative and thankful for the authors who are doing events like this with us still, and for all of you attendees who are joining us for these and spending an extra hour or two on the computer. So thank you. Some Zoom etiquette things. We have the chat open for anyone who wants to put out comments, celebrate Nina and Tiffany, to interact. I'm not sure if Nina and Tiffany will be following the chats as they talk, because it could be distracting. But Elena, my coworker, is in the chats. She will be sharing links to remind you to purchase the books. And one reason to purchase the books, other than to support the authors and BookSync, is that both Nina and Tiffany will be supplying us with book plates for anyone who purchased a book through Eventbrite. So if you registered and purchased a book that way, or through BookSync's website, through midnight Pacific time tonight. So if you're on the East Coast, you get 2 extra hours to get that in, 2 extra hours. So make sure you place an order with BookSync, and we will send those book plates out separately from your books, and we'll keep you posted on that. So, all right. That's all I have. Oh, and the Q&A box. So if you have any questions throughout the event that pop up while they're talking, feel free to enter those into the Q&A box, and I will come back onto the screen towards the end and read those on your behalf. So that's it. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce our beloved and local award-winning author, Nina LaCour, in celebration of her newest novel, Watch Over Me, the highly anticipated follow-up to the Printz Award-winning We Are Okay, which that book made me cry really late at night, so I'm excited about this one. Joining Nina today is fellow award-winning author Tiffany D Jackson, celebrating her new novel, Grown, a riveting, ripped from the headlines mystery that exposes horrific secrets hiding behind the limelight and embraces the power of a young woman's voice, and is currently sitting on my TBR pile. Normally, I would have everyone welcome you with a cheer, but in this virtual world, I'm going to encourage everyone to send their love out to you in the chats. Nina and Tiffany, I'm going to pass it on to you and see you when we're ready for the questions.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's so nice to be here, here at BookSync. And Tiffany, welcome to our West Coast bookstores.
Thank you for having me. I've done one West Coast bookstore in my life, and I think that was 2018 maybe, so this is actually amazing. So thank you.
Yeah, BookSync is a really cool, it's a small indie chain, so it's all over the Bay Area, and they host amazing YA events and have for lots of years. So it's a special place to be. I want to start by congratulating you on Grown. I held it up before, but I might have been off screen then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I held up yours because I was like, I'm so excited. Let me also hold up this. So, okay, so you see the cover, right? I marked the page, but then I was not prepared for our eyes to be open on the opening page. I was like, I know I saw like the graphic when you put out the cover, but when I opened the book, I was like, oh, like it took me by surprise. It's so gorgeous. So congrats with all of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really cool surprise for me too, because we had, the artist had done sketches for the cover, so like a couple different options, because her name's Pippa Young. I love her work so much, and she sketches everything out and then paints it over the sketch. And so she had drawn a couple of different versions, and the version that I had voted for using for the cover originally when it was just the pencil drawing was this one with the eyes open.
Okay.
And I kind of liked it because the watch, like the O, like her open eye was framed in it, and it was pretty cool. But people, you know, the design team and a bunch of people really liked the cast downward, which I agree is really beautiful. But I think as like a nice little surprise, they included both pieces of art. So that was really nice.
Which is funny because, you know, we don't typically, you know, traditionally we don't typically get a lot of say in our covers. But recently, I mean, at least for me, I know I definitely had a lot of input in Groan's cover in terms of like what I was kind of looking for. I mean, basically I was like, you know, she has short hair and, you know, I want a yellow cover. Like, I was very generic.
Oh, that's great that you knew the color.
I knew I just wanted something like bold and yellow. And this was like almost like the first sketch. And I was like, how did you do that so fast? That was amazing.
It's gorgeous. And the thing that was a surprise for me when it arrived was this foil here. Like, there, it's catching the light, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's so striking. It's so beautiful.
But let's talk about, so we recently had a chat, not recently, this was only like 2 months ago. God, time is an illusion. But
time is crazy right now. Yeah.
We were talking about the idea of, you know, coming out in the midst of all of this and trying to write and create in the midst of this pandemic and stuff like that. But it's amazing that, you know, we still were able to put out work.
Yeah.
Like in the midst of all this.
I know, right? Yeah. And here we are still somehow promoting it, even though the world seems to have like shut down in so many ways. It's pretty amazing.
It's like it's on, but like off at the same time. So I guess I mean, where do we even start?
Well, okay, so I'm currently reading it. It's like, you know how launch week is. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get to read the whole book, and instead I'm just like completely like dead tired all the time when I'm not like scrolling. But I'm loving it so much, and I'm like partially reading it on the page and partially listening to the audiobook, and your narrator is really wonderful. Have you listened to it yet?
Yes, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
I actually have an event with her next week.
Oh, cool.
So I get to sort of like, you know, ask her questions as well too. Like, what is it like for narrators reading these books and like becoming like sort of like emotionally like you take on, like you're an actress, you're taking on the emotions of these characters. So that's pretty cool. I actually had a chance to read like a huge chunk of your book after because I was too trying to like read everyone's book before I like, you know, came and sat down with everyone. And it's such like, of course we were getting this like during like launch week and everything is But what I absolutely loved about this is because I know you mentioned before to me that, you know, this was sort of like a ghost story book. And at first I was kind of like, okay. But then when I started reading, I was like, oh no, there really are ghosts in here. Like, I don't know why I didn't believe you before.
That's hilarious because last night I did an event with Brandy and she was talking about this experience, or our colleague Brandy Colbert, who's wonderful. She was talking about this experience where like I read it out loud because they both teach together at Hamlin University, and like we have, you know, faculty readings as part of the program. And I read aloud a section, and it's literally the section where like Mila first sees the ghost. Like that's what I read out loud. And Brandy told this story last night that like when it was announced that it was a ghost story, she was like, what do you mean? The ghosts were real? Like she had the same reaction.
Because it's something, I don't want to say unexpected, but it is somewhat unexpected. There's such like what I love most about your writing is that it's tight and it's tender at the same time.
Thank you.
Like your characters are so just like, you immediately fall in love with them, and you always pass like that first like 10 pages test. You know how like sometimes people will like open up the first page, and if you're like into it, then like, okay, cool. And then you read like the first 10 pages, like, okay, boom, I'm gonna like actually like buy this book. And your novels always like, they hit like, it's almost like you do it on purpose. It just hits a mark. And what I loved about this is like, I immediately was like falling in love with the character within the first 10 pages. And then all of a sudden we're meeting ghosts. And I was like, wait, there's really ghosts here. And so I don't know why I didn't believe you at first. You actually, I mean, you totally told us, and it's actually in the flap copy. So it's like reading is fundamental. I don't know.
I mean, it is unlike me. I went in a different direction. So, you know, maybe that's
it is very unlike you, but you did it so well. Like, it's like such a flawless transition. What made you decide? I mean, I guess maybe I should ask, like, where did the inspiration for the story come from?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll answer, and then I have things I want to say about yours too. This is always so hard when I'm like, no, but I have questions for you. But I will answer your question first. So let's see. I love ghost stories. Like I really love ghosts, but I'm not that into always like what happens after. Like whenever like books or movies get into like this super horror aspect, I kind of lose interest a little bit. I'm just more interested in like the feeling of being haunted. And so I wanted to try it out, but I didn't know if I could do it. And I'd been wanting to for a long time. And then after I finished We Are Okay, my last book, I kind of had this period where I was searching for like what the next story would be. That one was such a like book of my heart kind of experience. Like it poured out. It felt like so right. And I felt really proud of it. And I was like, what am I going to do next? And I felt a little bit overwhelmed by just like the idea of a follow-up. And so I decided that I'd always wanted to do a retelling of some kind. And so I started looking through some of my old like books that I used to teach when I taught high school, and just these kind of like these classics that would be like ready for a retelling. And the book that stood out to me was The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, that novella. I don't know if you've read it. It's like a weird little story. Yeah. I used to teach it in my like high school Gothic literature class, but I hadn't read it until I took a Gothic literature class in grad school. And I was like, what a weird thing. So the reason that I liked it was that it had a governess who's like this young woman who goes and lives with these children, and then it's haunted where she ends up going. And I thought, oh, that would translate well to YA, because like I could have this young woman, right, who's like just newly adult, go to this place, and then have it be haunted. And so that's where it began. And then it really like strayed from the source material. Speaking of straying from source material, isn't that a good segue?
Yes, that was good.
So, yeah, I mean, talk about like opening pages of a book, like starting grown. I mean, just immediately, like, I mean, I'll tell you all because it's the very beginning, right? I can spoil the very beginning, right. But I mean, there's this description of like beet juice being everywhere. And then of course it's not beet juice, it's blood. And it's just like this incredibly evocative, tense opening where we are just like in Enchanted's mind and like in her disorientation and her confusion. It's just like such a taut, beautiful, violent image. And I want to ask you so many things about this book, including about the structure, but I had my great segue. So let's talk about source material. So tell us the idea behind Grown. And I know that there are a few that have converged.
There is a few. So Grown was actually born out of the response to the R. Kelly documentary. There was a lot of people talking about, basically victim blaming and sort of chastising the victims and saying like, oh, these girls knew what they were doing. They probably were only after his money, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept on saying like, you're literally talking about girls. You're literally talking about children. And yet there was an adult in the room that should have known better. So my whole focus in every argument that I ever got into about it, even on social media, was, but he knew better. So why are we focusing on the person that knew better? Why aren't we focusing on the person that knew better? Yeah. And then it really frustrated me, the idea that people couldn't understand how a girl would fall into such an abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. So I decided to sort of set out and, quite frankly, this wasn't the story I was planning on coming out with this year at all. I was sort of, the R. Kelly documentary aired, I think like January of 2019. Yeah. And then everyone kept saying like, you totally got this. You totally could do this. Because of course, all my other books are based on cases. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, oh, this is not really what I want to do. But then it just kept like scratching at me, and I'm like, fine, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And especially since, like, you know, I also have been in an age inappropriate relationship. When I was 15, my first boyfriend was 22. So that also sort of like layering in like my own emotions to this book in general. And it just became like this thing where I was writing it, and it was one of the first cases that I covered that didn't have a lot of research involved. I mean, there was research, don't get me wrong, but I think all my other cases were like old, and they had like books and documents and court case, like everything was readily available. This was like, things are still happening. The Me Too movement is still kind of uprising. And so there's a lot of things that I still didn't have access to. So a lot of it was more of my emotions in the midst of it, I guess you could say. But I think that writing it was Mark Oshiro asked me this last night, and I think I was saying it was pretty cathartic to sort of like sit down and write the story and really lay out how a girl can be groomed and manipulated. So it sort of like kind of puts all that sort of questions to bed.
Yeah.
Completely. That's my hope. I don't
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even from the early chapters, one of the things that stands out to me so much about it is how you've written this girl who really, like, she is in touch with her sexuality, right? Like, she is very much, like, she is attracted to him, like, very strongly, which is what I love about that in the context of your book is, like, to show girls that, like, yes, you may have those feelings, and it's not your responsibility to be the one that says no, you know, it's not your responsibility to do that.
Is exactly what it is.
Yeah, because I think
it's still possible.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I think so many young women who have been in that situation think to themselves like, oh, well, actually, like it wasn't his fault because I'm the one who like pursued him, or like I flirted, maybe I put out the wrong signals or something like that. Like there's a reason why people were reacting that way about the R. Kelly stuff, and that you had to get into Twitter arguments about it. And I just think, it's just like, it's such a gift to young women to have a book like this, to be able to see and be able to have it help them with their own like internal landscape as they examine these things that have happened to them or that they might fall into. And so not only is it just like this incredible read, but it's also like telling girls like yes, like you can have these feelings and these attractions, and that does not mean that it should go in the way that it goes, and like still, you know,
exactly. I mean, like, even without, you know, first boyfriend aside, like, you know, there were men that I was attracted to that was clearly like not my age, but I would never, you know, per se act upon that. And I never thought that they would like want me either. It's kind of like, you know, every girl, I mean, at least when I was growing up, this is totally like telling my age, like every girl was like, ooh, Leonardo DiCaprio, like, you know, but he wasn't looking at us. So it just, you have to worry about these fantasies. When men act upon those fantasies, that's when, like, you know, like you're endangering people, which I'm hoping that kind of like plays out and is explained in this story. Because I think we need to start young, right? We need to actually show kids how this is a possibility. And especially since, you know, she's 17, so she's at the precipice of adulthood. And turning 18 in the midst of the novel, like we need those lessons to be sort of like, you know, ingrained in a sense, which that's another thing that I actually really loved about your novel. Not to even like, I mean, the segue was so like flawless too, but I love the fact that you are tackling a girl, you tackle characters who are literally on like right after high school. Like you're hitting them where there's so much change. Because I think a lot of people think that, you know, the clock strikes at midnight when you turn 18, all of a sudden you're adult and you know everything. And that is just truly not the case.
No, not at all.
So even when, like, you know, there were questions about like, you know, oh, do you think you're going to college? And, you know, she really like, she totally like sideswiped the questions like, oh, you know, maybe.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's an interesting time. I mean, I had this like, Just artistically, like when I'm sitting down to work, like a high school setting is no longer a setting that I'm interested in exploring, but I'm still so much interested in exploring that time in life, right? That age. And so I have found that my books have just been like edging older and older, right? Like and We Are Okay Too, she's in college and like living in a dorm. And I do have high school scenes, and there's so much richness like in that. There's so much that you can do with a high school setting. And so a lot of the flashbacks have it. But for this one, I was like, I'm just going to get rid of all of it. And she's not even going to be in college. She's just going to be on this random farm somewhere, and it's going to be a ghost story.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was actually going to ask you about like the research it took for this novel, because like, did you like, I always love to ask the authors this, like, you know, did you method author? Did you like go off to a farm without your phone? And it was like farming, picking flowers and all that kind of stuff?
Well, okay. So my wife for a little while was doing a lot of wedding photography, not a lot, but like a little bit of wedding photography. This was like many years ago. And she had like gotten a couple gigs from friends who were getting married, and then like they recommended her to their friends, and so it was like this kind of like certain subset of couples like in the Bay Area having weddings, and several of them had weddings where you drove like a few hours up the coast and went to a little farm and had like this cute little like DIY wedding with like, you know, like they like decorated the farmhouse and had like flowers everywhere. And a couple of them were on flower farms, and I would go along as the like assistant photographer. And so we spent like so many hours in these beautiful remote places that are like not that far from the Bay Area, but feel completely removed and in their own world. And they're often foggy and coastal because flowers grow well in that environment.
Right.
And so I think probably that setting, like that's how I got the setting. But then once I started writing, I did visit a couple flower farms for research, which is just like the most like peaceful, beautiful research you can imagine, right? Like you go up to this beautiful place. Yeah.
I was hoping for you to just like sit there and write your whole novel there, but obviously, you know, we're adults.
I would have loved that. I would have loved that. Yeah, but I did like, I had a complete draft to watch over me, and then I went and looked at this farm, and then just like being in Mendocino in that beautiful area, I did do a ton of writing while I was there, and the world kind of came to me in a much fuller way, like being in that area. Does that happen to you too when you like do research? I know that most of your research is like case studies and that sort of thing, but do you travel for it, or like when you're immersed in it, does it like all kind of like come to be?
I definitely do a lot of like method authoring in the past. Like even for my first book, I definitely, you know, for Allegedly, I went to a lot of group homes. I went to prisons and stuff like that. So I definitely got immersed in it. And of course, obviously, for like I was mentioning for Grown, I couldn't do a lot of research because there wasn't a lot like fully readily available. And as my therapist said, I couldn't do research. I had to do soul search. And I was like, man, you were like so worth all the money. And because that was like spot on for exactly what I needed to do for this. So in this instance, and this is probably why I'm so like, I mean, obviously this book is like really tense, and, you know, generally speaking, this is the most I've ever talked about my own personal experience. But I think I had like this level of discomfort because I don't have like my research binder to like hold out in front of me to protect me from any criticism, which is what I had for all my other novels. Like I had like thick ass research binders that I would like, if anyone said like, you know, oh, this didn't happen, I'm like flipping through my binder. Well, here it says here.
Right.
But with this one, I have like a computer folder, and I'm like, this feels so like, I feel so naked. Oh, which is one of the reasons why, you know, we were talking earlier about the fact that we're doing all these like Zoom visits and, you know, touring this way in this comfortable environment. Quite frankly, I'm actually very grateful for that. I don't know if I'm fully ready to be out in the world and absorbing other people's energy, standing in front of a crowd of 500 people talking about myself, and then having to absorb or take on people's pain. Because that happens a lot too when we're, as authors, we're natural empaths, and whenever we talk to people, we're like we allow them to dump their stories on us whenever they feel like when they see themselves in our novels in any way. So we absorb them. And after 2020, after this year we've had, I just don't know if I was ready for that. So here I'm like, get to talk to you. I get to be in California, but I also get to be in my safe space.
That makes so much sense. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about how, how signing lines can work and all of that. And people, like, on one hand, it's fantastic because like they're offering a connection, right? Like offering a personal experience. A lot of my books have dealt with really heavy subjects of like loss and suicide and all sorts of like, you know, difficult things. Like, and it's like there's it's a line and it's chaotic, and then someone comes up and like tells you the secret or this like hidden like truth about themselves. And I know it can be difficult because you're sitting here like with a line of people behind them, but you also want to make sure that they know that you like hear and understand and appreciate being told that story. And then they move on. And I know that like I've had so many nights in hotels afterwards where I'm like, did I do a good enough job? Like, did they feel like I understood them and cared, like in that like fraction of a moment?
Yes. And so whenever people used to like, whenever we would go to like festivals and stuff and people want to like hang out afterwards, I'm like in my hotel room, like, under the covers. And I was like, I can't think of it right now. Like, just give me a moment, which is, I mean, I think about also you, like, as We Are Okay, like, just the amount of people that probably, like, came up to you just to tell me, on top of the fact that they probably are fangirling, because, you know, I obviously fangirl over you all the time.
Likewise.
But I'm just saying, just in general, like, with some of the topics you have covered in your past, I'm sure, like, that's why I feel like I'm so, like, in love with seeing you do this story, Watch Over Me, because it's just different. Like, I haven't read every book you've ever published, but from the 3 that I've read to hit this one, I'm like, whoa, like, okay, I see you.
Yeah, you know, I felt like I needed to do something different. I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, you've written your books so fast compared to me. It's incredible, your speed of publishing. But it sounds like for you too, you were ready to do something different, like to turn to a story that was more personal to you and not as connected to the cases, right? Like, as you said, like one that doesn't. And I felt like that's what I needed too. I needed to just like push myself a little bit more. And mine wasn't, it was definitely a different type of thing. Like when I decided like, I'm going to incorporate ghosts, like that was definitely a stretch for me. And it was difficult, like figuring out the balance between like how much to explain and how much to leave unexplained. And can this just like exist as a world where this is like the logic of it? And, you know, like, can we believe like the suspension of disbelief? Like, can we like believe that there's this farm there and it happens to be haunted? Like, I don't know, you know?
But it was so flawlessly done too, which also leads me to the other question about, like you mentioned the idea that I do write relatively fast. And I have come out with a book like every year for the past 4 years now. But what I admire so much about you is that, quite frankly, you take your time. And, you know, I have had so many mentees and students who have taken your slow novel writing lab, which, you know, of course, I clearly want to take.
Anytime.
I need to unlearn. I know I really do need to unlearn this habit of just sort of churning out work and just letting things marinate and sit in a slow cooker and, you know, come out with something that is delicious and still like, that's what I love. I guess maybe that's why I love so much about your writing, is that there is something so beautiful about what you put out, that every word is like tactful, even like the does and the ums just seem so perfectly placed that there's nothing is wasted. And so I feel like, I mean, I guess it's not even really a question, it's just like gushing. But I guess what I love so much about like the work that you do and like what you, like the standard that you set is something, and I always tell you, like, you know, me and my other writer friends were like always like, what would Nina do? Like, would she be sitting here like throwing herself, you know, throwing paint on the wall and like killing yourself over this one novel? Or would she say, you know, no, this novel's not ready yet. Like it still needs a bit more time, still needs a bit more seasoning. And I think we all as writers should really come out and, you know, express that, like express the fact that we shouldn't be like killing ourselves over every book, that creativity does take time. And so that's what I love so much about your lab. But anyway, that's just me gushing.
No, that's so nice. That's so nice. And I mean, it's been like a real privilege to be able to take my time with my books. You know, I've been like lucky to be, you know, for so long to have a partner who's super supportive and like that I can work at my own pace. Like that's something that's really been wonderful. And I think that like taking my time and being able to take as long as each book takes is also something that's taught me a lot about how I write. And I think like my where I feel like I'm moving right now is in a place where I can produce a little bit more, and I want to push myself that way to produce more. And I think like a lot of it also has been like I've been telling myself like, oh, I'm always a very slow writer and that's always how it needs to be. But I've realized that like slow can also just mean like thoughtful and intentional and not necessarily like slow. So maybe you can, you know, take some of the inspiration from the slowness, and I can take the inspiration from your like wonderfully productive self, and then we can meld and like both have like
middle of some sort, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, when we say even like writing slow, it sounds almost derogatory, but it's not. It is very intentional. Like you write very intentionally, and I feel like we see a lot of, you know, a flash in the pan with authors who come out and like everything's incredibly flashy and stuff like that. But it's like, do you want to be just an author, or do you want to be do you want to just be a writer or a person who just put out one book, or do you want a career as an author?
Yeah.
And I feel like when I think of my career, I think of you in terms of like, you know, what you're intentionally doing and what you're definitely trying to like put out. Like nothing is a waste. Every book like deserves awards. Like we don't need to just sort of like shelf this project and be like, oh, that was cute. Like, no, like I think that's something to aspire to, that as authors, I think we all should sort of like start like coming out and saying like, you know, especially to aspiring authors, that this is not normal. Like what I'm doing right now is not normal. And I will take a break one day.
Yeah. And well, hopefully it'll be now, right? Hopefully with this beautiful book in the world, this will be a time to pause after you're done with all the events. So I'm seeing that we have just a couple of minutes before Q&A time, but can I ask you the last question? Because I really want to ask you about structure. Because I mean, one of the things that makes Grown like such an incredibly compelling read is that it begins in this bloody room, right? And then it goes back, and then we're following Enchanted's, you know, journey, getting, you know, becoming groomed and getting herself deeper and deeper into this like really scary situation. I don't want to give things away, no spoilers here, but then we get to like return, you know, through like a 911 call, or, you know, other methods of storytelling that show us, that remind us of this like incredibly tense present. And you know, for a lot of the book, like the chasm between like where she ends up and where she begins feels incredibly wide. And so I would love to hear from you a little bit about how you came to the structure that you came to, and just like, I don't know if there were challenges in it for you, or if it was like a really natural part of your novel.
So I was talking about this before, that or with a friend. So originally this novel was actually supposed to be a book in verse, and then I quickly realized that that's not my strong suit. And so I was sort of playing around, and I knew like I wanted like, you know, it to feel like it was tense and tight. I didn't want anyone to belabor on something, so I wanted it to like kind of like flow like like in that regard. But as far as the actual structure in terms of like going to past and present, I really sort of applied the old-fashioned like horror story method. You know, like whenever you like watch a horror movie, especially like a haunted house movie or something like that, like you see something in the very beginning of most haunted house movies, you know, you see something that you know that something is wrong. And now you want to continue watching the movie because you want to see the main character or the star of the movie actually like see this wrong thing that you also experienced too. So I sort of applied that method in terms of like, and I've always wanted to start a novel like this. And I wanted to sort of like play with the idea of like, you know, waking up and having like somewhat of amnesia. I've always wanted to play with like an amnesia type story. I know that sounds really cheesy because it seems like a, like kind of, you know, I don't know. It just seems like, you know, oh, she woke up and she doesn't remember anything anymore.
No, it's like inherently compelling. There's a reason why it's used. Yeah, it's awesome.
I've always loved that. So I was trying to find like a creative way to make it seem like that's something that's feasible, like the suspension of disbelief. Like that's something that we all sort of have to hold on to in fantasy and ghost stories and even in like, you know, thriller criminal novels. Like we all have to like hold on to like something like that. So that was sort of my intention when I tried to structure this novel. And it does kind of make you like, whenever I find like openings like that, it does make me want to keep on like reading because now I want to like know what the hell is happening. And it was actually my editor's suggestion because it was actually supposed to just be that first scene and then like, boom, that's it. Okay. It was my editor's suggestion to continue to like put those verses of, you know, going back to the present and past throughout the entire novel, which actually worked out. Because at first I was like, oh, we don't need it. We just need this one beet juice like chapter and then like, boom, we're done. So.
No, yeah, no, I love just having those because you like almost forget because you get so immersed in the backstory, you know, the backgrounds of everything that's happened that then it's like a surprise to turn the page and it's like, oh yeah, like this thing has happened. It's so good. It's so good. Everybody needs to buy it and read it. I can't wait to finish it.
We're time for questions.
Yeah, I think so.
Questions, and it actually, you were leading in towards the vein of most of the questions, which fall into advice about writing and nurturing yourselves during this time. So I was hoping I could kind of combine them all, but they all have different aspects. So I'm just going to start reading the lists, and I'm going to say the names, and apologies in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name. Let's see. The first question is more about self-care from Sandra. She's asking, she says, it can be so hard to write books like these. How do you take care of yourselves when you're creating and discussing works like Watch Over Me and Grown?
Do you want to start, Tiffany, or should I dive in?
I guess the biggest thing that I do in terms of like writing hard stories is I do try to write them sort of fast. Sort of like you go into like, you know, a room of pain and then, you know, you try to deal with it really quickly and then you run out. And it's easier for me to do that really fast and then come back and then try to edit it instead of just sort of belabor on it. But in terms of finding joy, you know, I think this summer I particularly like went to the beach like every week. That is very much my happy place. And, you know, it's actually mentioned in the book as well too, Far Rockaway. I go there all the time since I've been a kid, since I was a kid. I used to go there all the time. My grandmother lived out there as well too. And then also I have a puppy who you probably, hopefully you can't hear crying at the door. And, you know, as much as he's a pain in the butt, he also brings me joy. He's a silly, floppy little thing. And yeah, I watch also TV. Like I've definitely, this is the first time, especially since I deal with chronic pain, I deal with chronic migraines. This is the first time where I haven't like pushed myself to like, I haven't pushed myself too hard. Like I'm not like I'm taking time. I'm like, you know what, I'll get to it. I get to it. I'm not gonna like kill myself trying to like answer every email. So this is the first time in my publishing career that I feel like I've really taken that time to slow down and not, you know, take care of me first.
That's so great. So good. I think for me, like, I mean, there are certainly little things that I do for myself that give me breaks in between the writing. Like, as we've been talking about, I tend to stay in a book for a very, very long time. So I am living in that world for, you know, a year or more. And, you know, I mean, like Tiffany said, like getting outdoors helps. Like for me, it's just like taking walks wherever I am. That absolutely helps me. But also just the act of writing it myself, like the act of writing itself, it helps me. Like, even if the subject is really dark and painful to write about, like the process of taking like this traumatic thing, but then like crafting it in a way that feels good, or like feels like it's like purposefully placed into a story, like that in itself helps me. Like, and you know, Watch Over Me is very much fiction. Like, I certainly didn't have any kind of the experiences that Mila did. For those of you who've read it early with her mom and Blake or anything like that. But even when we're writing about things that are totally fictional, like we're drawing from our own experiences and our own pain, right, in order to craft this thing. And so for me, I try to think about it as a cathartic experience, or like a way to make sense of something in my life that might not be really like able to be made sense of in the real world. Like in a novel, you're able to transform it into something that's beautiful or compelling or scary or whatever. And just like taking something that's painful and then making something out of it, I think is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves.
Wonderful.
This one is kind of similar, so you can say I already answered this question, but this one's from Natalie, and she asks, what are some of your strategies for writing and nourishing creativity during stressful times? Is it the same as like going for walks and playing with the dogs? Or do you have some?
A little, like, I mean, to be truthfully honest, this is the first time in my life that I'm actually experiencing real writer's block. I've never had writer's block before. Even though I used to get this question, I would give like, you know, my kind of generic answer, like, you know, yeah, you have to refill the creative well. You go to museums, you go where the character is setting at. And like, this is like kind of like, you know, my cheat code. But this is the first time that, and I really blame this pandemic. And I'm glad that I'm not alone as far as a writer is concerned, because everyone I've talked to have all like had this moment of like, I can't write anything. And I've never had this before. So it's slightly scary, to be honest, because, you know, we need our creativity like as our livelihood, quite frankly. But what I have done is I have tried to, you know, ingest as much other people's creativity. So even like going to watch like, you know, Zoom chats like this, going to people's launches, reading books and like watching television and stuff like that. I've definitely sort of kept, you know, the wheels going. And I have like, you know, basically a running document, a running note tab in my phone that I sometimes like write like just random lines that I'm like, I don't know where this is going to go yet, but you know, at least it sounds good.
I mean, that sounds good to me. You've been working so hard. Like, it makes sense to me that you had hit a point where after releasing so many books in such quick succession that you just would need a break, you know? Yeah. It makes sense to me. Yeah, I think just like being forgiving of ourselves, you know, however we're navigating this time and stressful times in general. Like, some people will just need to rest and, you know, forgive themselves for not being able to create things during this time. And other people will find that like creating things is the way that they can get through this time. And that's just like a different, however you are processing this moment, like we've never experienced anything like this before. So like, however we're doing it, if we're, you know, I feel like we're doing it fine. Like, as long as we're getting through it in some way, like, and being kind to ourselves and not expecting things of ourselves that we're not able to do right now, then that's right. Like, this is, I mean, it's wild. And things just keep happening, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. So let's just try to make it through. Yeah.
This one kind of falls again into the same vein, which is from Adib. They ask, how do you deal with self-doubt? I'm an aspiring writer who has wanted to write for the longest time, but I'm always in fear that any idea I have has already been done better.
Oh, I like this one because I have this idea too. I mean, don't you, Tiffany? When it's like we have a concept and then we're like, oh no, but it's just like this other story, or or like someone else has done that. Yeah, I think like for me, the most helpful advice for that sort of question is just the truth that like we all navigate the same world, and we all have like there is a universality to many experiences, and we all understand things differently, right? Like heartbreak feels differently to everybody, or like if you're going through it, the way that you go through it, or the things that capture your attention when you're going through it, that's unique to you. And so you can write a story of heartbreak, which, writers have been doing for all of time, but you can just pay attention to the things that make it your own, and then just like embrace your own way of experiencing that and looking at that, and trust that that will be different enough in order to make it stand out. And I think as long as you keep that in mind, like you are the only person who can tell your story in exactly your way, that can be a heartening thing to turn to whenever you feel that self-doubt.
That was exactly what I was going to say. Like, you're the only person that can tell your story your way. So yes, everything has been done like 3,000-5,000 times over. Like, and that's cool. We still buy your book. But even though a story may be told like 1,000,000 times over, the character is always different. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Like, you'll never be able to truly duplicate someone else's character. It's kind of like humanly impossible. Like, unless you literally are just like lifting and plagiarizing lines, which, you'll get called out for. So it's not exactly the best idea. So I feel like we all, even the most like experienced writers, the millionaire writers, we all experience self-doubt. So you are actually doing something that, we all have experienced in our past. So I would say like, take comfort in that, knowing that we are all experiencing self-doubt, even as we launch our books right now.
Yeah.
And just, keep on like continuing to write, continuing to submit. Like, it's literally like, every failure at this point is, just another step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So agree.
This one is also from Adib, and it is to Nina, and again along the same lines. You pushed yourself by adding ghosts, but you generally write contemporary. How do you still maintain the Nina LaCour touch or voice, even through different genres?
I mean, it's funny to me because I think a lot of people have the same resistance that Tiffany had, thinking like, oh, it's like, it says it has ghosts, but it like, you can't even like, but you don't even believe it, because people are still marketing it as a contemporary novel and listing it on like the list of contemporary releases. But I mean, I can't disagree. Like, it has ghosts, but it's like still very much like our world. I mean, it's still very much recognizable. So I see it as just like, it's like my normal work, and then I've like added another layer to this particular story. And I mean, I don't deny that there are ghosts. Like I've never seen a ghost like in this way, and I think I use them a little bit differently in this book. But like,
yes, you
yeah,
do.
Yeah. But I still think that it's a pretty realistic novel, and so I understand why people are describing it that way. So I have not yet like taken a huge leap into a totally different genre, and like it's certainly not like a fantasy novel or anything like that. It's a very, very realistic Nina LaCour book that happens to have some glowing figures dancing around.
Very nice. Well, the next two are for Tiffany. Again from Adib. You talked about unlearning. I'm an aspiring writer, but in the business field. How can I unlearn corporate writing to elevate creative writing?
I feel like this is a better question for Nina, because like you actually like truly teach writing, and you've had more experience. Like I come from the film background. I literally don't know what I'm doing at all. So
well, then I would say that that's kind of interesting, because you did, like, you were more like immersed in one form of storytelling, right? And then you've, you know, crossed over into another form.
Yes. So I guess, I mean, from my standpoint, knowing that, you know, I didn't get my MFA, I didn't, you know, study writing in this traditional form, I would say the best way to sort of like unlearn your business field writing is to actually just pick up as many fiction books as possible. It's literally like, and I know that's a very like, you know, sort of like standard answer when people say like, you know, the best way to become a writer is to read, but that is really true. Like you literally have to just absorb as much creativity as possible. You literally have to just basically like sink yourself into it. You also can pick up as many writing craft books as humanly possible. I know that's one of the biggest things that really sort of like tailored my voice, is reading as many story structure craft novels as I possibly get my hands on. So it is about sort of like I mean, if you can't like get your MFA, if you can't go to like creative writing workshops, if you can't do all those things, like sometimes your best weapon is like to be self-taught. And that's definitely what I did. I didn't get a chance to go back to get like a creative writing degree. And I really didn't have a lot of time working in television. I didn't have a lot of time to go to writing workshops. So I did a lot of my own self-study. And I got a lot out of it. So that's what I would probably say to you.
Very nice. All right, next one for Tiffany, from Malika. They said, I heard for Grown, you took a month to create the first draft. How long did it take you to complete the first edit?
So, I give that caveat that, you know, I did write Grown in a month, and that was like draft 0. And it was really rare for me to do something like that because I was behind on deadline. So that's why my editor got literally a draft 0. There were like sentences that didn't even like make any sense. There were sentences that literally like dropped off. Like I just stopped writing it. Like it just ended with like, you know, and with no period or nothing. So that was July, then we went through edits. So I will say that, you know, I was still making slight changes up until the very like day we had to send it in for the printing, which was I think in June. But I was very meticulous about it as well too. Now there are other books that I've written that, you know, I wrote really fast, but it took like 2 years, 3 years to actually like draft, to edit and development edit and stuff like that. But I don't know. How long did it take, how long did it take you to write Watch Over Me?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around your timeline. That's amazing. It's like not even computing in my mind. It's very impressive. It took me a long time to write this book. I mean, I wrote a draft. I mean, I don't even know. I've lost all concepts of time too, but it took me a long time. I mean, I was very, very slow writing it. So I think maybe like 1.5 years or something. And then revisions. I did a revision, like a full, almost like a rewrite of the story that was a total disaster that I had to throw away. Yeah. So that was very intense. And then I had to go back to like kind of the first draft again and realize like, oh yeah, this is what it was supposed to be like. And then, you know, kind of figure that out. So but every process is so different, you know, like sometimes stories come out and they're like great and there they are. And sometimes you have to
You're
just
like,
sometimes you have to just sit with it. So yeah, it's always so different.
We've got a few more questions coming in. Your conversation is bringing more on. An anonymous person is asking a little bit of a follow-up to Deeb's original question. How do you deal with self-doubt and imposter syndrome, specifically when it comes to having marginalized identities?
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, I'll speak for myself for Watch Over Me. Like I have been very aware, and it means a lot to me to be able to write for teenagers and to reflect queer experiences. And all at the same time, like romantic storylines are not where I generally go. Like I'm much more, I love heartbreak. And like, yeah, I just like, it's really, really hard to write like a romantic book for me.
Right.
Or not like a romantic book, but like where like it's a central love story. Like I don't know, it's difficult. So my third novel, Everything Leads to You, was very much that. And it was very difficult for me to write, but I felt really good about it. And I felt like that was, you know, I really wrote it like as a gift to like queer teenagers, and especially, you know, two girls falling in love. Like that's what that book is. And that's what it was meant to be. And I felt great about it. But ever since then, there's been a lot that's gone on in my head when I start to write a book, because I don't want to let anybody down. Like, and luckily, like more and more, there are more and more stories with queer characters across like a spectrum of sexuality and across, you know, gender identity. And like, it's amazing. Like we're in a like amazing time for queer YA. It's just like incredible. So I do actually feel like a little bit more freedom to explore whatever stories that I want to, without thinking like, am I going to be letting people down if I don't center some sort of, you know, romantic relationship? Because at that time when I was writing Everything Leads to You, for example, I was getting so many like letters from teenagers who were like, this was my first time like seeing like two girls in love in a book, and it meant so much to me. And I wanted to honor that, and I wanted to keep giving it to them. And yet I also felt like, but I don't want to tell more and more like falling in love stories, because I want to write like sad, dark, like angsty stories. And so with Watch Over Me, it was tricky because like there really is not much romance at all in the book. And even though like I firmly feel Mila is a queer character, whenever I try to like say it overtly in the text, like because of the like atmospheric, like ghosty thing where like nothing is labeled or explained, it felt so stiff, like being like on the page. And so I ended up like, there is like this, she feels attraction to a couple people at the farm. So I do feel that it's a queer novel, but it's really like so much not focused on her identity. It's focused on what's happening to her and her experiences. So I do feel like a burden and an honor of representation. And it is something that I like struggle with all the time in my work. Yeah. Tiffany, how about you?
I definitely deal with imposter syndrome most of my career. Cause like I said, like I've always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know that writing was going to be this way. Like I truly thought that I was going to be the old woman by the sea. Like I didn't think anyone was going to see me at all. I didn't know I was going to have to do all these like virtual visits. I really thought that I was like going to be like a hermit, and that was it. And now I see people like, you're my favorite writer, you're my favorite author, and I'm like, you need to read more. And I have this like this weird feel. I'm honored, truly. I am honored because I do have that feeling of, I wish there was a me for me when I was younger. I wish there were more authors who wrote about characters that I can identify with, that I can truly see myself on the page. And so even though, yes, it makes me like squirm, and I'm, you know, avoiding things and just being like, thank you, and you know, stuff like that, I also know that it is a responsibility. So I do try to deal with it by, at least, like you said, like honoring my readers, but also honoring myself and like what kind of stories I want to tell as well too. Because if I like, whenever you do something just because you think you're supposed to do it, it comes off like so contrived. And I think that's where we as authors, as marginalized authors, is we need to kind of hold that ground as well too. We need to hold our line about, you know, yes, I know I'm a marginalized author, but I'm so much more than just that like I shouldn't just have to like tick off a checkbox or whatever for what you're looking for. I should be able to kind of like write whatever I really want to write. And right now, like, yes, I'm in this like thriller category, and next I go off to horror, but you know, I should be able to eventually write a love story. I don't know if anyone trusts me to do that.
Of course. I trust you right now.
They're probably waiting for something to happen in the midst of it, which I totally understand, because it's hard to trust me, especially when most of my novels have plot twists in it. You just, you know, well, yeah, there's definitely, that's a great question in terms of like imposter syndrome and like how do we deal with it as far as being a marginalized author, because there's also the pressure of getting your story right, because there will always be like, you know, someone in your own culture who will have a problem with something you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have pressure from all sides.
Yeah.
Those are great answers. All right, we have 2 more questions. Again, from Adib, for both of you, in an industry that seems to be wanting larger and larger books, how do you decide the length based on what feels right for the story? I feel like both your books are shorter, but very sharp.
To me, Tiffany's book feels so long because mine are so tiny. I'm like, I don't feel like this is a short book. I'm looking at the page count,
which is hilarious because this is actually my shortest book, and I'm
is
trying
it really?
to Nina's length. Like I'm trying, like moving forward. Like I'm telling you, every time you publish a book, as soon as it's done, I literally want to go through and like mark things off with pencils. Like I want to edit as I go along. One day I probably will. I like just go into like a bookstore and be like, can I just see that copy real fast? Let me just see this line. No, I like tight books. I like books that like tell a story and there's not a lot of fluff. There's not like, you know, and I think that's the screenwriter, that's just the filmmaker in me, because, you know, we have 90 minutes to tell a story, unless you're doing like a space opera like Star Wars where you have like infinite amount of time. But we have 90 minutes to tell a story. There's a 3-act structure. This is what we have to get done in this time period. And so for me, when I read stories and I feel like I could take out like 10, 15 chapters, I like hate that. So I don't feel like books should get longer. I feel like they should definitely get shorter. And I think has a lot, not so much to do with the industry, but so much to do with craft. That was like shots fired. I didn't mean that, guys, but
I liked it. I mean, yeah, I've definitely worried because my books are so short and they've become like shorter and shorter. And at first I was worried about that. And then I realized, you know, like, I think the best things that we can do for ourselves as writers is just like embrace how we write, you know, like yes. I write short books most of the time, you know, like I write slowly and I write few words. Like that's how it is. And
but they never feel short. They never feel short to me.
Oh, well, good. Because
yeah.
But when reading, I love both experiences of reading. I love like reading a short book that I can get through quickly and it's like just like its own little thing. And then I also love like a longer book where you can like lose yourself in it. It can last you days and days and you can just like linger in that world. And so I think that both, you know, are wonderful ways of telling a story. So Adib, I would say, you know, however it's coming out to you, embrace your own style and keep going.
Nice. Well, I saved this question for last because I think with everything that we've been talking about and all the questions you've got, that this is a very strong one to end on. And that is from Sophia, wondering if either of you mentor writers, or I'm going to add on, do you know of any mentoring programs for writers?
So I know, is Pitch Wars one of them? They do like a mentorship program, but also We Need Diverse Books. They have a really great mentorship program. I currently am not fully mentoring any writers right now, not because I don't want to. I think my plate is sort of vastly full right now, and I don't like mentors who don't have time, and I don't want to be that mentor. So I feel like my schedule will definitely open up further in the spring, and then I kind of like open up the doors to the church for people to come in and ask their questions, which I never sort of like shy away from questions, especially from new writers or debut writers. Like, you know, I try to be readily available to like take a phone call. So maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just like set up like, you know, like was it like office hours?
Yeah, I love
like you're
that.
back in like college and
Tweet it out.
you got 30 minutes. Ask me your question.
I'm gonna call you and ask you questions about suspense and like how to keep readers on their toes. As soon as you open up that phone line, I'm gonna be calling you.
I'll open up the doors. Yeah, I'll open up the doors for. I'll get like a calendarly like invite thing going, and people can just book hours. And I'm like, okay, this is as long as I mean, yeah, because I want to be able to. I wish I did have enough time to like sit down and read your novel or read your work in progress and stuff like that. And right now, between my own work and you know, dealing with my own like health issues, this is just not the best time for me to be anyone's mentor. But there's definitely plenty of programs out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have a whole kind of vision about how I work with writers, and so I teach at Hamline University's low residency program, which is really a wonderful place. But you know, of course, not everybody can be in a graduate program for one reason or another, financial or time or the commitment that takes. You have to travel twice a year to this one and be away from your life for like 20 days a year, and so it's pretty intense. And then I have my class, the Slow Novel Lab, and I don't read work there, but we talk a lot. We have lots of Q&A sessions, and it's a nice conversation. And then I also try to offer free resources. So I have a podcast called Keeping a Notebook, where I talk a lot about writing and give writing exercises. And then I also do a lot on my newsletter too, in terms of giving just reflections on writing and things that I've learned, and things that I can offer to people for free. But yeah, it's hard. Sometimes I do get emails asking me if I'll read somebody's book, and I'm just overwhelmed. And I'm sure, Tiffany, it's the same with you, that we're also like part of being a working writer in this community is we're also reading one another's books quite often, right? Drafts of friends' books. And it's like so exciting, but it's a lot of my reading time is spent, you know, reading friends' books.
Reading people's books who are not coming out till like next year. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. But I will say, if you can sign up for Nina's newsletter, I follow Nina's newsletter and her podcast. It's full of tidbits, and it's very much like a nice hug that you get through the internet. So I definitely, me and friends always talk about Nina's newsletter as well too. So yeah, definitely sign up for that.
Thank you.
They can do that on your website, Nina?
They can, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Very nice.
I'm like answering for her. I'm basically like her, you know, her hype man. I'm like, yes, you can get it from her website. Thank you.
Well, great. I think that was a great way to end tonight's conversation. Your answers are all very thoughtful. If you read through the chats, there's a lot of people thanking you for, you know, the words that you put to their questions. Yeah, thank you so much, Nina and Tiffany, and congratulations on the release of your books. It's very exciting. So again, to all of our attendees, don't forget to purchase your book before midnight Pacific time today, or midnight your time, just in case. We'll send out book plates along with your, a little bit after. Yeah, appreciate Tiffany's earrings, her grown. And thank you again for tuning in tonight. BookSync really appreciates you joining us, both to the authors and to attendees. So
yeah, and thank you, Hannah and Elena and Books Inc. and Elise for putting this together, and everybody, and so much fun.
I'm so excited we could get you on. So until next time, I hope to see you both in person someday.
Yes.
Or back here on Zoom. We'll see how this goes in the future. Well, best wishes to everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you. Everyone be well.
Bye.
Bye.